Thanks a lot for tuning on my YouTube channel. Today we are going for a talk that is not technical. So the target of my YouTube channel is to have content that is technical mixed with strategy content. The reason is the sum up of the two are actually delivering a proper posture. So you need to have clear the strategy and understanding also the technical context. But this talk will be focused on how to design a strategy. So it will be executive oriented. So first of all, when you get into the car, you have your way of thinking on the priorities. I remember the first driving lesson that I got. I was asked what is the first things that you do when you are at the driving seat, knowing that I was going to take it wrong. With a bit of social engineering, I reply, I switch on the radio. Here in this picture, probably we should go for petrol, but if you ask this question on what first, you'll find many different answers. So this talk is also focused on what does make sense to prioritize and how to structure it. So I wrote various resources on the topic, but I want to sum up in something really easy to be digested. So there is a big difference between the theoretical and the practical side of things. This one is seen everywhere in any field. I think it is extremely important also in cybersecurity. When you are going for a pen test, you have a well-defined scope. You did create a set of rules for the engagement that conditionate also the output and the result in general. So is the same similar difference between martial arts and the never-ending conversation on which is more effective in a street fight. At the time that you are having an attacker that can study your company for month and month and have no limit in time, no limit in resources, no limit on usage of tools, completely different than, for example, in pen test engagement. You'll find that there is an async. The attacker doesn't have a set of rules. And it's the same when you are having a competition in martial arts or you are in a street fight. There are a lot of conversation on what is effective. I want to highlight this difference because I'm not suggesting any offensive response in terms of what to do if you get attacked. I'm talking about identify the priorities and be effective in your moves. This one is the target of the talk. Uh, I do like chess. We know how many combination you can have in a chessboard, but we do know that at the very beginning, the number of moves are lower than during the game. So the opening is extremely important. Each player can have his own opening, but there is a sort of strategy on, for example, having control of the center of a chessboard. It's not something so clear in cybersecurity on what you should do in terms of strategy, because if you take strategy books, each is pushing in a direction, trying to give you a checklist. What is the difference between my checklist and the checklist that you find? More focus on the effectiveness of a street fight, and I'm trying to connect the dots around it. So let's start with the first topic. Know what you protect and where it is. Sounds so simple, but is not. You can have multi-cloud, you can have migration, you do have different infrastructure connected with private link. You need to focus on knowing where is your data. So what you protect, what you prioritize. So sometimes I see a lot of effort on asset categorization, but it's more data categorization because at the end, when you get exploited, is the data exfiltration one of the biggest target. If you start to have only an asset categorization with a categorization of the asset, you do have an understanding of what that asset is having. But you are going to miss the fact that an attacker could move some data from one asset to the other one. And so your strategy is not actually looking into the street fight normal modus operandi. And so what is happening is pivoting across asset is quite common. So if your strategy is I categorize the asset because that asset run only application that are that type, you'd be better off to try to focus on the data and understand where the data travels and combine an asset categorization that I'm not saying that is wrong, is actually a principle of the ISO 271, but it's also important to put it into a context of new technologies where you can be without an asset, like serverless function as a service, or have ephemeral assets like PaaS. In the container space, container are continuously regenerated, redeployed. And so you need to have a strategy that makes sense, that is sync also with technology. So what I'm suggesting is try to unify, integrate, and categorize. So you could use visibility across. You heard from all industry and everybody is talking about XDR, unify the visibility, but you need also to think how you could do it. And that is really important because there is stack that, for example, is multi-platform that is capable to create queries. OS query is one. Another important point is IAM is a pillar identity, but you need to think that everything is orchestrated as well. So use the orchestrator as your pillar because they include also the identity is extremely important. So define your orchestration pillar and start from there. The orchestrator, for example, an SCM and Intune is capable to see the overall picture, is capable to run query. That is what I'm trying to stress on at this point. The other things is you see the efforts, for example, CISA releasing the last Kubernetes hardening. Hardening is the most important piece. I'm not saying that vulnerability management doesn't play a role, but most of the zero day are also due to sloppy hardening. So at the time that you do hardening right and you tune properly the environment, you set up condition to to make the life of attacker more difficult. You could have a completely different opinion and style. You could like, for example, a certain type of martial arts. But if you take them all, they are all protecting themselves in somehow. And so there are certain pillars that are common in terms of what they do. They lift the arm to protect the head. They do have different styles of movement, but those pillars are basic. Know your body, know where if you get it, you'll have great problems. But hardening is your defense, is your posture, is your way of. So the attention that you have in vulnerability management need to be sync, also being sure that everything is tuned. If you notice, a lot of hardening guides and stress from CISA are about orchestrator. The main reason is because orchestrator is one of the main to be exploited by attackers, because obviously the overall automation across the state and the capabilities to pivoting is way higher. So do hardening, use project like OpenSCAP, use OPA, sys benchmark, is everything there. Next point, I'm stressing the fact that you shouldn't reinvent the wheel. There are standards, and the problem of your company was already faced by somebody else. Be humble is the main things in security. You go in a fight and you don't think about how good you are. You focus on how to make it to survive. The same is about this reuse stuff that is mature, is supported by organization that already fixed your own issue. We are lucky because with automation, this degree got got a way wider distribution. There are a lot of open source projects, like for example the Open Policy Agent (OPA), that and the OpenSCAP that I mentioned before, and many other standards. But as I told you, you should invent how to do hardening, how to do policy, how to do automation of those. It's all there just to be used. One of the main message that I always deliver is cybersecurity is missing the role of a security integrator. Who does connect the dots? It's not just an architect role, because architects can have a focus that is too enterprise or too engineering. You need somebody that look at the big picture in terms of integration of layer, but also avoiding redundancy. You bought or you are using multiple products that are overlapping as functions. Keep it simple is one of the main reason why things works. Is the main rules on everything you do in life. Keep it simple is the way. And you see in any kind of self-defense techniques, the fact that are simple and easy to be remembered, and just those are the difference across systems. So it's the same in cybersecurity. You need to know what to do and create just one way to do it and secure it, because you can't deliver a security control and don't focus on the security of a security control. It's probably the best way to exploit an organization is actually to point to those framework. And so don't reinvent the wheel, because there is a lot of room to create a wider attack surface than you think, and exponentially with automation you risk to do big damages. Don't create a vertical silo. That should be a rule. I started my career 20 years ago, and when I was working with C-level executive, I was working with CTO, because back then there was no CISO. Was the time 2005 around? I was working, for example, on transforming the NOC, the Network Operation Center, into SOC. So CTO was actually generally having security people within. It's funny enough that the concept of security champion came as a fresh air when actually was always like that. The truth is that in somehow a CISO vertical was created. Right now, the trend of the Sec DevOps and the automation across the state is actually trying to reestablish a balance But you need to understand that if there is a CISO vertical, they are like in the picture. They look from far away. It's not okay. It's wrong culturally wise, and it's wrong because all your employee will say, "I'm not security. It's not my role." Is security is a duty of everybody within the organization, and I will stress how people is important. But don't forget, because the vertical CISO is quite common across organization and is creating a lot of issue because based on which CISO is on duty can actually change the security culture. So you could have a CISO moving from a management function and be more business oriented, and another one coming more from the technical background. There is no right or wrong, there is a difference in approaches, and actually what you need to use is logic, and the logic is to not have silos. Measure security posture globally. So as an example of a dashboard that I show you when you get into the car, you need to know when something doesn't work. If you get into the car and you have an ABS alarm, you know that you need to be more careful driving. You know that the attacker know when you are more in trouble. There are business that are having seasons. Let's think, for example, all Black Friday sales, all change management, change feeds. Every every sector does have something specific. So don't forget that attacker know that, and you need to be capable to always measure a security posture globally. So you can have a multi-cloud, on-prem, whatever, but you need to glue up everything. See, for example, the efforts in Power BI, the fact that everything is becoming data. That is one of the points that I'm stressing in point 6, be data oriented. At the end of the day, what gets stolen is data. Can be intellectual property, PCI, doesn't matter what is the subject, it's always data. And so you need to have an approach that is data oriented. You need to have an understanding of all your data life cycle. One of the big problem is having strategies that are extremely focused on some area of a life cycle of a data, neglecting attention to others. For example, the security of the backup is extremely important. You see in ransomware how often even the backup get compromised. So we should talk on testing and repeating. I see as a big mistake that disaster recovery exercises are not reviewed also from a security standpoint and how the two works together and how the integrity of the backup is becoming the day-to-day problem. Another issue is people think that is in the cloud and so is safe. It's not. You have services for disaster recovery in cloud too, and it's not just because it's another product. It's just because there is a reason for. And so if it's in cloud, you need a disaster recovery design and tailored for that too. So that is what I'm stressing here. Sync all internal strategies. If you have a minimum async, it's a big issue. So it's like when you are in an orchestra, you can have most talented player, but if a orchestra director doesn't give the right direction on how to play, the overall sound isn't right. So The best talent need to be coordinated. And the internal strategy, company-wise, is one of the biggest issue because CFO, CTO, CEO are all roadmap that need to be combined. Don't forget shift people management. It's people is an asset, is the biggest asset that you are having. And so everything need to be coordinated because security awareness is not just the annual course. It's something more, it's a culture. So compliance is only a part of a security strategy. So the fact that you are compliant doesn't mean that you have done security right. Compliance is generally giving you a baseline, but you are at the very bottom of what should be your security posture. You need also to think how historically big compliance program like PCI got updated based on new data breach. So back in the days, for example, there was not much of attention on terminals, payment terminals. You see how everything changed. You do see still some misalignment with security in sometimes, for example, SSL offload and other technical things that I will avoid to mention to keep the talk not technical, but you need to think what I said, what you need to consider compliance as just a portion of that, and you need to exceed that bar. You need to go a miles forward, and go a miles forward means also to work smart. Be sure that you use also a stack that tomorrow doesn't create any economical problem for licensing, for example. Because if tomorrow your budget is changing, your security posture shouldn't. And that is the big challenge that I don't see the industry to stress about. And that is another problem. Always keep the big picture in check. Yeah, I took a lovely picture of a satellite from the space because is actually the truth. You need to be capable to zoom in, zoom out. It's the only way to see where you are because the perception of yourself can contain bias as well. And the complexity of an organization is absolutely amazing because you'll always have a supply chain and a trust problem. You always trust something. When you switch on your laptop, your OS can be secure, but your BIOS could have some problem. So there is always a line of trust that you are having. And so you need to have control on that trusted boundaries. And that means to look from outside without bias and see how all pieces works. You see also the complexity of IT and OT security and how IoT is playing a big role. New sensor, new kind of devices that in a standard IT were not so common like nowadays. Different evolution and strategies, also in terms of migration. Sometimes the security of a migration is another big deal. If you are not securing the migration, some pieces that you leave around are probably the one that get used for an attack. So don't forget to invest in people. They are your greatest asset, but it's not just a marketing. And I didn't place it as the last one because it's the least important. It's not. It's actually the glue of everything. Get talent means that they have a reference. There is a nice motto that say people doesn't leave company, leaves managers. And that is because a culture that is wrong let the wrong managers to be around. And so invest more than you can on understanding the ethics of your manager. Some of the biggest data breach were having somebody protecting themselves and not disclosing in time something. Ethics first is one of the first things. And if you see, there is a big gap. During the interview, there are no tests on ethical topics. And so decision making, ethical, those should be part of the interview of those key roles because they will be the reference for all your entire company. And you need to let everybody to talk and speak freely, have a really good culture because security wise, that is really important. Let everybody to express an opinion. Disagreeable person are giving you good food for food. So let an environment where they can survive and let everybody to work together to see the picture like from the space and be capable to zoom in and find and spot the issue. That is really important. I did my best to make it short, straight to the point. I hope you enjoyed. I did create a plethora of resources. You do have everything on SlideShare. This presentation is on SlideShare. In the description of a YouTube video, you'll find it. Subscribe so you'll know when there is new content on YouTube. And thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate your time watching this presentation. Thanks a lot. Take care.